Hi, we're going to be talking about Erikson's psychosocial development and social emotional development. To begin, we're going to be talking about Erikson's psychosocial development, which is the emphasis on culture and society's effect on human development. The first stage of Erikson's psychosocial development is stage 1, trust versus mistrust. This occurs during the first year of an infant's life. And the basic virtue is hope. The negative outcome is suspicion. So this is when a child is first learning its environment, the people around it. It's getting familiar with the people that are constantly in their life. And the basic virtue of hope means that they are actually going to be learning something. They're going to learn how to trust the individuals in their life when they cry or need to be fed. They understand the relationship that when they cry, people come to their attention, whether it's for feeding, for diaper, for love, for attention. And they develop these things in the first year. So the negative outcome, if they're not getting that type of attention, then they don't build that bond with people and they develop a very mistrusting relationship with adult figures in their life. The second stage is autonomy versus doubt. This occurs around the second year of life, and the basic virtue is will. The negative outcome is doubt. So in this stage, children are learning to become a little bit more independent. They still have that very egotistical sense of self where the world still revolves around them, but they are learning about themselves a little bit more. They need to be guided in the world around them. So they are learning the world around them as well as learning about the aspects of how the effects of having a negative relationship impact their life. So in stage 2, they're really exploring the world around them and learning how to trust things and how to doubt them. In the third stage, initiative versus guilt. This occurs in ages 3 through 5. And the basic virtue is purpose, where they are really developing a sense of self at this point, and they are starting to live out or do things outside of just the home. They're beginning to go to school. They are learning their purpose, their place in a bigger part, not just at home, but they're learning their place in different societies, different communities. So at this age, you really want them to learn purpose. They're developing relationships with other people outside of the home. And the negative outcome is inadequacy, which they don't really feel that they have a purpose in another community or others in other communities that they are acquainted with. Stage 4, industry versus inferiority. In this stage, children are developing from ages 6 through 12. The basic virtue of it is competence. So they are really learning about, in school, they are learning to be competent in certain aspects of subject matter. So if they really aren't getting support from their teachers or from parents at home, then they start to doubt themselves as a student. So this is really their school age and learning at adolescence how their competency is developing and how they are really becoming a studious individual. So for the next stage, stage 5, is when children start to really grow. This is when they start to become the teenage years, and it is identity versus role confusion. So you have to think about this as really the teenage years of 12 to 18, when children are really starting to define themselves as an individual. So the basic virtue is fidelity, and the negative outcome would be rebellion. So if they're not really learning their true identity, they're not figuring out who they are and the role that they play in society, what they want to do, if they're very negative, I don't know what I want to do when I grow up, that really fosters that rebellious side of them, where they don't feel that they don't feel that they are adequate enough, that they don't have the tools that they need to move forward, and really start to rebel against their role. They don't know where they fit. And as we move on to stage 6, this is when you're an adult. These are your adult years. In stage 6, you develop intimacy versus isolation. Your basic virtue is love, finding that partner, finding that happiness, finding your purpose, and developing into a family and having your career. This is really, the main years of your lifespan that you're going to have with not only by yourself, but with others. So the negative outcome would be not finding love, not having that social aspect or those families, and you develop, really unrest in your life and unhappiness. On to stage 7. Stage 7 really talks about the age in your life where you are middle-aged. So your years right before you're about to move on to the last stage of your life. So these are like your middle-aged years where you've probably already developed your family. You're learning your how to care for others. That's the basic virtue, what you're learning, how to care for the people around you. And the negative outcome is that you don't get those. You no longer have people that you're bringing into your world. Family-wise, you're stagnant. You no longer, you've stayed the same throughout these years, and you feel a lot of isolation as you move forward into your life. And finally, stage 8 is integrity versus despair. This is the last years of your life when a person is already stopped working, and this occurs around ages 65 and plus. So the basic virtue is everything that you've learned throughout your life. You've created wisdom. You've learned from the things in life. And the negative outcome is that dissatisfaction, is that you are not happy with what you've accomplished in your life, and you don't feel satisfied with how your life has gone up until that point. So those are the 8 stages of Erikson's psychosocial development. Now we're going to be moving on to social emotional development. And this is really something that happens internally, and which is the intra, and then the interpersonal, which is other relationships that you have with those around you. So things that are occurring inside, but also the interactions that you're having with those around you. So first, social emotional development is really your ability to understand your feelings and your emotions, and then being able to manage those and express those in a really constructive and empathetic way with your society, with the people around you. And this is something that you're constantly learning throughout your life, is really those social emotional connections that you develop. So positive relationships with caregivers really equal the social emotional development. So it begins with the people that you develop a trust with very early in life, from the time you're born. Those caregivers that are taking care of you really foster your social emotional development. If you have a very negative aspect with the people around you, then that's really going to affect how you grow up and the emotional damage that occurs from it. So this positive caregiving, the adults that are in your life, they really create this supportive environment where you build positive, nurturing bonds, and you're creating a very safe and responsible, they're creating this very safe and responsible home life for you. So this is something that occurs very early on, having those very responsive caregivers. And when you have those responsive caregivers, it encourages your emotional security as you grow older. It really helps to measure your state. So emotional security is that individual measuring of the emotional state that gives you the ability to cope with uneasy situations, but also positive situations. But having that emotional security, you feel like you know how you're going to deal with that, any situation that you are in. Children are not born with this type of security. Again, it is something that is grown from a positive adult behavior and what the child has witnessed from birth through the adults that are in their life. Yet the temperament is something that you are inherently born with, that it is something that is biologically predispositioned inside of your DNA before you are born. So these positive adult behaviors are really fostering and working with that temperament that the individual has had from birth as they move forward throughout life. And as children grow, they also develop emotional regulation. So these are things that they are learning from the adults around them. And that's the ability to effectively communicate their emotions with others and to understand the importance and acceptable emotional outcomes. They also learn impulse control. So they're learning how their emotions change over time and how not to let emotions get the better of them. And all this they additionally learn from a social understanding. So in developing relationships with others, their needs are met in a very variety of different ways, not just from the adults that are raising them, but from other peers, from other adults that they come in contact with. In developing the relationships with others in and out of the home, their needs are becoming met. So they're really understanding how the dynamics of relationships. And at a young age, these relationships really progress and teach children an empathetic understanding of other people's feelings. And as they're learning theirs and how people are meeting their needs, they understand in turn how to do that with others. So as they learn their place in the world, children begin to achieve self-efficiency. So they're starting to learn how to effectively carry out their behaviors in different situations that they're coming into play with. So how bullies, treat them at school, or how their parents treated them at a young age. They are learning how to learn those rights and those wrongs as they emotionally develop. And lastly, as they finally begin to have a sense of self, as they've grown to really find who they are, they really begin to understand themselves and where their place is in the world. And with that, they really develop their sense of purpose.